As you know, the Minding Your Business podcast comes to you via Brooks Brothers Consulting, Inc. Brooks Brothers was started by my brother Philip and I back in June in 2013. We are a business development firm. Help develop sales platforms and business development platforms for small businesses as well as financial institutions. Been working exclusively with financial institutions over the last few months, but as we round into 2019, we want to be able to work with your business at whatever level that you are, whether startup, small, intermediate, or even large. And so we specifically work with you and your leadership team to help develop, again, platforms for you to acquire and retain your customer, reach target markets and whatnot, and connect from a network standpoint with the type of decision makers that will help edify and grow your business. And so if you're interested in doing that, brooksbrothersconsulting.com is the move you need to make. That's brooksbrothersconsulting.com, or you can email me, Ron, at brooksbrothersconsulting.com. Of course, the podcast is powered by the Binge Podcast Network. The Binge Podcast Network, you can find it on binge.com. I'm co-owner of that with a good friend and business partner, Dominic Lawson of Owls LLC, as well as host of the Startup Life podcast, which you should check out. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you should make sure that the Startup Life is part of your life. So make sure you join that with Startup Nation with Dominic Lawson. And we've got a great host of shows as a part of that. We've got Don't Touch Nothing podcast. Of course, I mentioned the Startup Life. I've mentioned, of course, the Minding Your Business podcast is a part of that. And you need to check out the Racially Motivated podcast. Great folks on that. Make sure you check that one out. Let's Be Real and Quarterly. And we've got several others. We've got a NBA show that's coming that's going to be off the chain if you're interested in pro basketball. We've got art shows. We've got home base shows, everything. So between Dominic and I, we're really working a lot of those angles. If you're interested, if you've got a podcast idea, if you've got an existing podcast, we'd love to be able to work with you. The Binge Podcast Network is designed to be a platform for podcasters at whatever level that you're at to help you grow your audience. So at the end of the day, you can do it as a hobby. That's completely fine. But if you're looking to grow it, to grow your audience, and it's a great tool for helping you build your business, is to be able to podcast. And we want to be able to help you do that, we being Dominic and I. So make sure you get with us on a binge.com is that move that you need to make. I'm your host, Champ Ron. Entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. This is the Minding Your Business podcast. Let's go ahead and get this thing started.
What we do here is go back.
So, again, I'm Champ Ron. I'm your host, your guide, here on the Minding Your Business podcast. We are now at episode 73, y'all, which is phenomenal. Thank y'all so much for all your support over this now year and a half, and we're doing phenomenal. We're up to 28,000 downloads for this particular podcast. Again, with no mask, no gun, no gimmicks, no 50-cent marketing plan where we get shot and and come on and hit the scene and take everything by storm. We just did it just straight up, just showing up, being consistent, and you guys have been feeling it and supporting it. So I really appreciate that. And we want to get right into today's topic. Today I'm going to cover 50 big ideas for 2019. So I've heard people say, well, what about 2018? Well, what about 2018? You got 2 weeks left. What are you going to do? You had 52 in the whole year. You're down to, you've had 50 weeks all year to do what you're going to do for 2018. So yes, you want to finish strong, but you can do both. We are multifaceted creatures here as human beings, and so you can actually do both. If you want to still focus on 2018 and end it with a bang, do that, but you also need to be ready because January 1st is coming very quickly. Very quickly. It's going to be, 2 weeks from Monday? Something like that is New Year's Day. So you need to be ready for what are you going to do. You can't wait until 2019 to get ready for 2019. All right? And so that's why you're starting to see people focus. Matter of fact, some of your better companies are already focused even past 2019 into 2020. Doesn't mean you don't live in the moment. It just means that you need to have a plan on what you're going to do and what you're going to accomplish when it comes to going into a new year. And we use those as markers to determine that. So what I want to do is I want to go through the 50 big ideas. This was an article that came out in LinkedIn back on the 11th of December by a writer named Isabel Roll, I believe is her name. I may be saying the last name wrong. But she put out a really good article. There were a lot of contributors to the article, but it got a lot of conversation, a lot of shares, a lot of movement as well on LinkedIn. So for those of you that are big LinkedIn users, I, of course, shared it to the Minding Your Business Podcast Facebook page, which I invite you to go out and connect with, and do that sort of thing. But I did post it out there for you to read the entire thing. And so I'm not going to go through it verbatim per se. I'm going to give my take on what I think you should really focus on for your business. So of those 50 things, some of them may not always apply to your particular business, whether you're starting up, you've been in business 100 years, or anything in between, y'all. So don't take this with a grain of salt. There's always, every year, there's somebody that's going to predict what happens in the next year. A lot of times those things don't come true, but it's good to have on your mind to be considering and to be in front of. A lot of times when things don't come true is because people have been in front of it, particularly in a negative situation, to try to avoid it. But there are some things within these 50 big ideas that you're going to be very interested in your business, whether for-profit, nonprofit, or both. And so I want to go through that. But first, we got to go through Ron's rundown. So I've got a few things to share with you as it relates to a quick rundown of what's going on this week, locally, nationally, and in some cases internationally. So let's get it. All right, so Ron's rundown for today, Friday, December the 14th, 2018. What's up, Shavandra? What did I say? Hell, what did I say? Shavandra. Did I say it right? What's up, girl? What's going on? How you doing? Almost tax season. Y'all need to go see Shavandra. Also, check her out for your real estate needs as well. So, hey, Ron's rundown real quick. So this week, earlier this week here in the Memphis area, Shelby County, there was a proposal made by now outgoing superintendent of Shelby County Schools, Dorsey Hobson. He presented this to, I believe, the county commission, if I'm not incorrect in saying that, maybe even the school board. But it was a plan to close several schools throughout Memphis. Most of them are majority black attended in terms of the student population, but it's a 10-year plan, which it's kind of crazy. How does someone present a 10-year plan on their way out the door? So Dorsey Hobson is leaving the school system. I believe his last day is going to be like in early January. So man, that's cold-blooded gangster move when you can submit a proposal for an organization that you're not going to be part of, that you're walking out the door in a matter of weeks. To me, that's a cold-blooded gangster move, man. But so anyway, it had people up in arms on social media here in the Memphis area. And people had a lot of different takes on it, a lot of different views. I'll sum up my view this way. One of the things that you got to keep in mind anytime that you're closing schools, consolidating them and things like that, is you got to look at what's the impact on 1, kids, 2, the neighborhood, and 3, parents. So those 3 things need to be in concert. Kids, the neighborhood and parents. When you close schools, they have impact on neighborhoods. A lot of people throughout this country, particularly in urban areas, can understand and appreciate this, that when you take kids from one area of town, even if they're fairly close by geographically, but if you take them from one area or one neighborhood and you bring them to another, that's a recipe for disaster. And a lot of us here in Memphis can attest to that, not just hanging on to what happened in our, for those of us that graduated high school in the 20th century. But even today, when you combine kids from different areas, it's something you got to be cognizant of, because there can be a huge impact socially and culturally when you do that. And some of that impact can be fairly negative. And so that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, you got to look at the status of the buildings, which that's throwing some of this. The legacy Memphis City school system that consolidated into the Shelby County school system several years ago left a hell of a deferred maintenance expense on a lot of the capital improvements to the various school buildings. And so that's prompting this decision or this proposal, as well as you've had changes and shifts in population over the years. So some of these schools are not populated with students the same way they might have been in the past. And so when that happens, because the thing you got to remember is if you were going to a school and you were young, your parents didn't keep having children. So when you went to school and then everybody moved on, right, the people that were left, isn't as big a population, right? Because populations shift. In Memphis, they've shifted dramatically, probably a little faster than people really recognize. And so when you shift these populations and you have even kids within a neighborhood who are not going to the neighborhood school. So they live in the neighborhood, but for whatever reason, either the parents choose not to, or even the school system chooses not to have those kids go there. It's going to be a recipe for imbalance with the student population. And resources are resources from the business perspective. But none of that should be used, whatever your perspective is, none of that should be used to create divisiveness or to attack people based on where they live, where they chose to live, or where they chose to have their kids go to school or whatnot. We've got to get past that. And I'm going to talk about this actually in one of the 50 big ideas. Is going to be, we've got to get away from this ultra sensitive, this ultra aggressiveness that we have, whether it's on social media or even in person, in terms of our views, because this affects all of our kids, it affects all of our neighborhoods, and it affects all parents. Even if your kids don't go to the school, you might live in another community. Like here in Memphis, we're in a tri-state area, so you might live in Arkansas, you might live in Mississippi, you might live outside of Shelby County. But all of this infrastructure here all impacts these other areas. And so people have various levels of interest in it, but there's still an interest. And so it won't get better by us trying to, paint each other in these different lights based on the various views. Now, we should definitely call out hypocrisy, but at the end of the day, it's about us unifying. And again, those three things that I mentioned, y'all: kids, neighborhoods, parents. Those are the three things that should be up towards the top of the list in terms of how are we managing the impact of that, and are we cognizant and mindful of the impact on all three of those areas. So something to keep our eyes on, but it was just a proposal, so there's no need for everybody to get their panties in a bunch. You just relax. It was a proposal by a guy that's leaving the school system anyway, so we don't know, nothing's been approved or put in place at this point. All right, so that's my take on that. We're putting that to rest until more information comes out in terms of closures and consolidations. And these things are going on all around the country. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure either you've been through it or you're having these similar conversations in your community. And if you're in business, you have an interest in what goes on with the school system as well. So you should keep your eyes and ears open to that, whether you have kids in it or your kids are grown and they've been through the school system. Irregardless of that, you should keep your eyes in on it. You may have tax dollars going to it, or it just impacts everything culturally and socially and business within your community, because your future supporters, your future employees, whatever, can be coming from these school systems and these schools. So you're going to have a vested interest in all of it. All right. So this past weekend here in Memphis, we had the second annual Black Christmas Expo. One of the things that I have the benefit of versus, many others is when you're in a city that is somewhere between 65 and 70% black population that makes up the city of Memphis, you get the unique opportunity. So, I'm not sitting here, talking about black business while I'm in Alaska somewhere where there are no black people. You know what I mean? So when you get a chance to support businesses, whether black businesses or across many cultural and racial and ethnic areas, that's a great thing. And so I'm fortunate to have that opportunity. And so this past Saturday and Sunday, Cynthia Daniels hosted the Black Christmas Expo. And it's not even about the religious context to it or support how you feel about Christmas and the holiday and whatnot. But here's the thing. Anytime that you have an opportunity to support the people that you interact with on a daily basis, whether it's on social media, whether it's in the streets, whether it's in a restaurant, library, co-working facility, networking event, whatever that is, you should do that. And we had an opportunity, and Cynthia created a great platform for us to be able to do that. And I was able to go on Sunday, had a chance to interact with great vendors. And I just want to share with you what Cynthia shared earlier on Facebook. If you're not familiar with Cynthia Daniels, you should connect with her. And you should connect with other entrepreneurs too. It's not about who's popular and who's popping. If you've listened to this podcast, MYB, I'm not big on the whole how many likes somebody gets or how many shares or any of that. I'll share things on here whether you get 2 likes or whether you get 5,000, and whether you've got 5,000 friends or 100. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you look like, single, married. I don't get into any of those boxes that we all like to sometimes use when we try to determine what support we're going to get. Well, let me jump on the train that's popping and all. No. So no. But in this case, Cynthia's got something that's a really good platform that people need to know about, and it's the Black Christmas Expo, among other things that her and her team are doing. But she gave out some really good statistics, coming from the weekend that I think people should know. There were 50 businesses that were vendors, and this was in kind of the Midtown area, actually just north of Orange Mound. Over in our fairgrounds area where this was hosted. 50 vendors, a little over 2,500 patrons came, I guess, between the 2 days. So actually 2,580 patrons came per Cynthia, and it generated $115,000 in sales. Now, someone may be listening to this and say, oh, that ain't a whole lot. Somebody, in some other area of the country where those may look like not as big numbers. But there's a huge impact to that when you talk about $115,000 in sales between 50 vendors over a 2-day span. And what that allows those vendors to do is be able to hopefully use that and leverage that as a springboard to scale as they go into 2019. It allowed the neighborhoods and community to be able to come out and support these businesses on a unified front and a consolidated front. So versus in one-offs and things like that, you were able to come and do some great Christmas shopping. They had the Santa Claus there as normal. She had great music and things like that. So it's just a great environment. It was a great environment to connect with people that sometimes I don't always get the opportunity to connect with and discuss outside of on social media and DMs and Messenger and things like that. So it was nice to kind of have that human connection. But shout out to her. She's doing great things with that, and that impact of $115,000 in sales, where you've got vendors selling out their product and things like that, booking services and whatnot. That's just phenomenal. And as someone that can relate, who's created platforms for other people, that is a very selfless position to be in. And so I definitely recognize her and anybody else that creates platforms for other people. And I could spend the next 4 hours talking about different things that people do, whatnot. And I want to get as many of those folks on this particular podcast platform to be able to share what they're doing. But anytime people create platforms, it's very difficult. It's difficult working with people, as many of y'all know. It is difficult working with vendors and coordinating and scheduling and all that type of thing. It takes a lot of time, a lot of hours. And so when people do that, we should recognize them. So shout out to Cynthia for that on the Black Christmas Expo. Now, moving on to another quick subject as it relates to here in Ron's Rundown. What do y'all think about this whole Drake and Kanye thing? And I want to talk about it from a business standpoint, not just the social music piece of it, because I think everybody's well aware of who Drake and Kanye West are, but they seem to be going back and forth. And I saw a quote about Kanye telling them to kind of leave him alone, talking about his family, and supposedly Drake made threats and all this kind of thing. And, you know, him and Kanye have had an interesting relationship, kind of love-hate over time anyway, which is very interesting to me. But I think from a business standpoint, they both tend to understand what's going on. So they may not, they may try to play dumb and that kind of thing, but I'm not buying that. Everybody's looking to keep themselves relevant, and in a marketplace that is increasingly, I guess what's the best word? It's noisy, right? We're in a noisy environment where there's so many people doing so many different things, and there's so many platforms that people can get themselves out there in the public view. It's kind of like that street in your city where there's so much damn advertising, right? There's signage lit and everything. Those cities where you've got that main strip where there's all the signage and whatnot. That's kind of what the world's become. There's so much signage. Everybody's in overload of advertising and at the mercy of everybody's advertising. And so in an effort to keep yourself relevant, you got to constantly be doing things and kind of pushing the envelope. And I'm not suggesting that that's all they're doing between Kanye and Drake, but that's a good bit of it. A lot of it is, as big as stars and as big as celebrities as they both are, they still have to do things to keep themselves relevant. And that can't just be limited to putting out albums and things like that. So they're leveraging each other's celebrity and whatnot right now. So it is what it is. So share with me your thoughts if you're here on Spreaker. I see y'all commenting. So and then here on Facebook Live, if you've got some thoughts. Lawrence Armstrong, what's going on? Dominic Lawson, we was just talking about your brother earlier. And so he's joined in as well on Facebook Live. Dominic said that's real, support your folks. Yeah, going back to the Cynthia Daniels thing with Black Christmas Expo and all the different things that she does and many others do. Definitely got to support our folks. All right. So that's Ron's Rundown here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Let's get right into, real quick, the 50 big ideas for 2019. The 50 big ideas for 2019. We want to get right into that because it is it was very interesting. It's very interesting news. If you haven't seen it and you're a LinkedIn, go out there. Don't worry about your boss and all that kind of thing. I know some of y'all don't like LinkedIn because you can only post one picture at a time, and your boss might be out there and they can look at your profile, and you can't troll people because people can see that you're looking at their profile and all that kind of stuff. So I know that's why y'all don't like it. But anyway, go out there because there's great information. If you're in business, that's where you need to be. There's great information being shared. It's not just a job site and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of information and ways to connect with decision makers, which is what you're looking to do in business. Am I correct? Or can I get an amen from the amen corner? I see y'all on Spreaker. Yeah, y'all saying amen. Y'all not saying nothing on Facebook Live. I guess maybe I might upset some folks on Facebook Live, but y'all are all on it on Spreaker, so I see y'all. 50 big ideas. So number one, and what I'm going to do is, some of these I'm going to hit a little harder than others, because you can read it for yourself. But there are a few of these I've kind of circled in my notes that I think are really relevant for you and your business. So some things are not really relevant to the small business owner per se, or at least in my opinion, from my experience, and then my current research. But anyway, I'm gonna share kind of the top level on all of them, and then I'm gonna hone in on some ones that I think are relevant to you. Okay. All right. So number one, move over millennials. It's Gen Z's time. So keep in mind, Generation Z came after millennials. So these are people that were born in, say, 1997 or so and all the way up. So these are folks that now are about 20, 21. They're entering the workforce in terms of full time. They're starting businesses, things like that. But in this article, it talks about next year in 2019, Generation Z is now going to outnumber millennials. So, for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been this ultra prostitution around millennials. Everything, millennials, right? That's all everybody wanted to scream. Most people didn't do a damn thing with millennials, by the way, other than stick them in the cube and, you know what I mean, and underpay them and wait for them to leave and then hire another one, right? And then some thought that they were the gatekeeper to social media management and that sort of thing, which was true in a lot of cases. But Generation Z is going to be about 1/3 of the global population and 1/5 of the entire workforce all around the country, actually all the way around the world. So keep that in mind. 1/3 of the global population starting in 2019. So that's going to be critical to a lot of different things in terms of how people employ and how you manage their expectations. So now you're going to have millennials that are going to get a little bit older, and you're going to have to manage their expectations, and you're going to have to manage Generation Z. Next year is going to be the first time, too, in relation to this, that you'll have 5 generations essentially in the same marketplace, kind of working side by side. So you're going to have great generation folks that are still around. You're going to have baby boomers. You're going to have Generation X. You're going to have millennials, and now you're going to have Generation Z. So it's going to be ultra critical if you've got a small business, that you got to understand that there's kind of these 5 demographics that are out there now in your marketplace, and some may fit your target market in different ways than others. But that's critical because typically you only have, in most cases throughout human history, about 3 generations that are usually around. So now to have 5 generations that are going to have levels of spending power, it's going to be critical in your business that you understand the expectations of those 5 generations. And if you're in the workforce, you need to understand managing potentially 5 different generations. Number 2, the economy will slow down, is what it mentions. I've talked about this in the past, that look for kind of world growth to start to slow down in 2019. You're already seeing inflation having to be managed. You're seeing the Fed have to raise rates and things like that. What's up, Stephanie? What's going on? Alita, what's going on? Stacy Williams, how you doing, girl? Thank you for joining on Facebook Live. So the economy is going to start to slow down in 2019. We've gone a long way, several years since the 2008 kind of recession and whatnot. So we're due for that. You're already starting to see confidence among some surveyed small business owners that are saying they're concerned about the next wave of whatever the next downturn looks like. And I'll tell you, as a business owner, if you're a startup, next year is going to be big for you because there's going to be significant investment in startups. So if you've got a young business, you need to start preparing yourself to show how you're going to have scalability, because there's going to be some attention come your way. Companies will prepare for presumptive layoffs as a result. We'll see. That was number 3 on the list, but we'll see. Number 4, we're going to spend more time online than watching TV. This one's big. Okay, so there's so much content being consumed now that, and there's so many people that have cut the cord on cable. Matter of fact, when I had my guy Maurice on here with the On channel, his streaming service that you should check out, the On channel, kind of like Netflix, that sort of thing. We talked about in the third quarter of 2018 how people cut the cord on cable and satellite TV. Up to 1 million subscribers, I think, between Comcast, DirecTV, Dish, and all that. So 2019 is going to be the first year they're predicting where people are going to spend more time on the internet than watch TV, which is big. For Viacom, that's meant expanding its intellectual property across many platforms and creating shows for third-party streaming sites. So what you'll start seeing the big people do is they're going to get really involved in streaming, right? Because people are not watching, the traditional networks, whether it's local TV and these traditional channels. So that's going to be big, and there's all the internet content and whatnot is going to be there. So you need to watch out for that, as you already know, within your business. Brexit will continue to consume the European political scene. You can read about that. Nothing really big there. Inclusive design will go mainstream. Inclusive design, if you're not aware of what that is, that's more talking about how you're designing things for people with different abilities to participate in them, right? So a lot of that speaks to the use of artificial intelligence, which I'll talk about here in a second. But these are, being able to utilize technologies and design them in a way that people with different cognizant abilities and things like that are able to use it. So it's not like a designing technology for a one-size-fits-all. Number 7, like I just mentioned with artificial intelligence is here, y'all. It's going to be in every industry, and it's going to be involved in every job. So you're going to be susceptible to some level of artificial intelligence, whether you like it or not. 6 of the top 15 emerging jobs of this year, per LinkedIn, related to artificial intelligence. It is the fastest growing platform. It's up 190% globally from 2015 to 2017. And that is per LinkedIn. So there was a lot of hype with it this year, and you're going to see it incorporated in a lot of things going into next year. Number 8, the next social movement occupies Silicon Valley. So the cost of things in San Francisco are going up, and you're going to see some changes there in terms of how people interact with Silicon Valley, and you're going to see tech hubs, as they already have, spread out from that area. Number 9, governments will seize the opportunity to regulate big tech. So you're going to start seeing other countries, as U.S. companies are looking to go to other countries to hide profits and things like that. You're going to start seeing those companies tax those companies, countries tax those companies. The British government already plans a digital tax of 2% on tech companies, fighting back against U.S. tech giants that evade taxes by domiciling their profits in Ireland or the Netherlands. So that's coming, y'all. That can have a trickle-down effect to small business. So keep your eyes on if you see other countries start to tax tech firms, particularly coming out of the United States. Number 10, automation will disproportionately impact women's jobs. That one I'm not as sure of. They gave an explanation on that. I think it's going to impact jobs no matter what your gender is, because women are incorporated in just about every industry. And in some cases, particularly here in the United States, women are even starting to dominate some industry, although salaries need to match that. And that will start to happen too in 2019. You're going to start to see some right sizing, particularly coming out of the Me Too movements and things like that. Some proper right sizing of men's salaries to women's salaries. Let's keep going. Healthcare, number 11. Healthcare providers will cover your groceries. That's an interesting one, kind of involving Uber and Lyft. And they're already starting in Pennsylvania, where I just was last week. They're starting what's called the Fresh Food Pharmacy, where that provides patients with groceries, nutritional information, and classes, kind of cooking classes and things like that. So you may see healthcare providers get into the business of not just insurance, but how the things that lead to how people use insurance, which again goes back to artificial intelligence and things like that. They're going to use that to try to have some predictive information on how you use the healthcare system, and how things affect your health. So look out for that. I talked about the Me Too movement, number 12. They said the Me Too movement is going to enter phase 2, where you're going to start seeing not just people in the entertainment industry and media become susceptible to that, but you're going to start seeing at the mid-level management standpoint, things like that with companies. So if you're a mid-level manager and you've been doing some ridiculous stuff with women, you need to start getting your stuff in order. Stop it first. And everybody needs to stop it no matter what level that you're at. You treat people with the respect and whatnot that they deserve. But get ready, because you may start seeing in the news people that aren't, the big celebrities, and things like that, that get caught up in situations where they're not being scrupulous with how they deal with gender and things like that. Gregory Cox, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining here on Facebook Live. Number 14, the battle against extreme poverty will heat up. The global poverty rate has dropped. It's at its lowest level in recorded history per LinkedIn. But Melinda Gates, who's the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, she's quoted in here, and she speaks to how even though that rate is fallen in 2019, there's going to be a lot more effort to try to make sure to eradicate extreme poverty around the world. And you're going to see businesses getting involved in that. So, again, something to keep your eyes on. A U.S.-China Cold War could be fought on technology. So there's another number in here where I'm going to talk about China and Africa. But China and the United States have had an interesting relationship over the last several years anyway. China's trying to own as much of the world as it can. It has a huge population, and they need resources, and they're having to break out of their own land to do that, which they've been doing for many decades. But you're already seeing President Donald Trump, United States President Donald Trump, already engulfed in some dialogue back and forth as it relates to China with tariffs. And so you're going to see a continued battle with that, but more on the tech front. Number 16, what will matter at work is your humanity. So this is one. Keep your, put a pin in this one. And if you go read it, make sure you check number 16. This has already started, but you're going to see more of this in 2019. As you get more automation, you get more artificial intelligence. What's the one thing that you can't automate? And the one thing you can't automate is humanity. And what is humanity? Part of that, of the many things, is soft skills. So soft skills are going to become that much more important. Okay? So whether you're starting your business, whether you're in the workforce, whether you're doing both, make sure that you keep in mind that that is coming, and you need to develop your soft skills: oral communication, time management, leadership, people management, things like that is going to be uber critical. Uber and Lyft are going to lead the way of IPOs. You've got the what they're saying is me first, which is companies that only think of themselves are going to have to think of the wider community as well. So they're not going to be, CEOs will not be able to get away with just thinking about in a silo of their company and only them. They're going to have to think much broader. Cassie, what's going on? How you doing? And I'm just going through these because with 50 of them, I don't want to just bog down y'all with going through every single one. Medical data is going to become a little more accessible. So keep that in mind. You're going to see Apple get involved with that in 2019, with working with various companies and things like that to make medical data more available. So there's going to be some scrutiny there. CEOs are going to have to become more inclusive. So you're going to have this kind of cultural diversity movement that'll be going on in 2019, where companies are going to have to work to get more diverse, not just in appearance, but in cognitive abilities, working with people with different gifts and things like that. You're going to have to be able to be, as a CEO, you're going to have to be cognizant of what's going on with that. All right, let's keep going. College admissions is going to get more personal in 2019, so it's going to be more than just your grades and, I guess what else do they look for? They look at grades and test scores, I guess, with college. So they're going to do a little bit more than that. There's going to be a lot more focus on what you do beyond the classroom, which is your extracurricular activities. So keep that in mind with your children. You got young children, or you're looking to go off to college, their entire resume of what they've done is going to be on display, and not just those two areas. You got the gig economy is going to start to round its form out, which speaks to a lot of the Uber and Lyft and all that kind of thing. You're going to start seeing companies get back to wanting to hire people instead of doing 1099 contracts. So if you start to see less opportunities on the 1099 front, just know you heard it here first, that you're going to see companies, they're going to prefer to have you under their umbrella as opposed to just paying you for a short period of time. Now, that may be different in different parts of the country, but don't be surprised if you see some of that. Businesses are going, this is one you need to keep your eyes and ears towards too. Businesses will favor integrity over growth. Okay, so what that means is companies are going to get to a point really quick in 2019 where and they're being held accountable by this, by employees and the community, is how big do we really want to get, right? When you're scaling up your business, typically as human beings, we covet and we want to get as big as we can, right? And there comes a period now where, how big is big enough is going to be the question. So companies are going to try to right size themselves and look at, how big can we get before we lose control of things and we're susceptible to being too big or having too much girth out here. It's something you have to look at even for your own businesses. How big do you want to be? And can you maintain your integrity, your core values and things like that as you scale and you get big? Because that can become difficult. And a lot of people, if you never had your company get at a certain size, or you've never been at $1 million in revenue or 10 million in revenue or whatnot, you may not completely appreciate what it takes not only to get there, but then understanding once you do get there, how big is too big? Is 50 million too big? Is 100 million too big? So make sure you keep that at the forefront of your mind. Loyalty will beat novelty. The internet's going to become even more fragmented. And these are I'm just going through 34. Don't even try to guess oil prices. I'm not even going to try to guess oil prices. They're low right now, but it doesn't seem to be translating. I was talking to my guy, Dominic Lawson, about this. They don't seem to be translating to prices. So, gas prices have been falling, but prices of everything else, commodities and things like that, haven't been falling, which leads me to the thought of kind of this corporate hangover from the last downturn in 2008. Chief Ethics Officer is going to be the hot new C-suite title. That's going to, as you've seen, companies have issues with how they manage personal data. That's going to be a big thing in 2019. Okay? It's going to be, and your company is going to be involved in this, whether you're starting up or you've been around for a while. How companies are managing everybody's personal data, you're going to see the consumer start to rise up and demand how their information is being kept, what it's being used for, how it's being sold. And so these advertisers are going to have to adjust, and they're going to have to adjust some on the fly, because people are going to be more skeptical about how their personal information is being used after all the Equifax stuff. You just had Marriott go through a breach with their information, and things like that being leaked out there, and you don't seem to really know who's stealing the information and what they're doing with it. So just keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is Africa and China. Okay, so China is buying up a whole lot in Africa. All right, keep your eyes and ears on that. Like I said earlier, China needs the land. They need some of that infrastructure that you've got in Africa. Some of the raw materials and things like that they're needing because they've got a huge population. And so what many of the African governments are going to have to be cognizant of is how much do they let China, call shots in Africa. That's a big thing. So watch that out, particularly when I said earlier about the United States and China having their thing going on. So, it behooves you to keep your eyes and ears open to what's going on in China and Africa. We will reach peak outrage. So in 2019, and I'm going through this really fast, so hopefully everybody can keep up. But one of the things, and I spoke about this in Ron's rundown as it related to the school system here in Memphis, that there comes a point where you can't. It's not sustainable to just always be mad. I mean, hell, it's not sustainable. So just outrage can easily be modified. It can be manipulated and things like that. So what you're going to start seeing people do is in 2019, people are going to become a little more conscious as to how they engage in polarizing issues, particularly on social media and things like that. Faye, how you doing? Thank you for joining on Facebook Live on the Minding Your Business podcast. But people are going to be, and I've got another point I'm going to make on this here shortly, but people are going to have to look for, different, things to engage with. And particularly where people are talking about sensitive, polarizing subjects on social media and things like that, you're going to see people be less engaged in that kind of stuff, because people, we've kind of, for several years, we've had this, long-standing bickering of, when we post things and people get upset and there's all this back and forth, and outrage is not sustainable, right? And so people are just going to find something new. Find something new to get into. Companies will shift to an ecosystem mindset and hire for it. And so that takes you from more of a linear type of thinking where you're trying to predict everything to more of an ecosystem where you're open and you're a little bit more collaborative, and you're looking at things, second and third looks, I guess, is the best way to say it. So there's not just this dogmatic way of viewing the world that companies usually tend to have. And so companies are going to have to be open. 39, you'll eat the bug in your salad. So insects are said to have the most protein, more than any meat, and they're very environmental friendly. This has probably already happened. Y'all probably already eaten insects or bugs anyway, with what's out there, with all these no GMO, vegan stuff. Most of us are probably already eating things that are having some level of bugs already in it. And so in 2019, you're going to see that become a little bit more of an industry as people get past the gross factor of it. But in terms of diet, you've already got millions of people, matter of fact, billions of people who consume insects. Per LinkedIn, there are 2 billion people worldwide who consume insects on a regular basis as a source of protein. And so you're going to see that industry, and you may see investors get into the insect industry. They're plentiful. Obviously, they're high in protein. And in a growing world population, you have to find new ways to evolve the food channel and the food chain. So don't be surprised if you see that. Okay. Learning isn't enough. Professionals will focus on doing. So in 2019, You're going to start seeing people get away from just taking classes, just to take classes and have certificates. Now people are going to want to know, what have you done? What are you doing? So as you acquire knowledge, and this is going to be a shift in America, because we've had this for the last decades, where it's just, we became very slick, and it's just, well, just get the degree and someone's going to hire you for it just because you have the degree. And now just having the certificate or degree is not going to be good enough. Now you're going to have to show and demonstrate how you're taking that information, that knowledge, and then applying it. So keep that in mind. Share that with your children. Order is going to come to data collection. I already spoke about that in terms of people's personal data. 43, we'll ask ourselves hard questions about what free speech means. 44, corporate generosity will grow and help the bottom line. 45, brands won't be able to stay neutral. I talked about that. You saw that this year with Nike and many other brands who took stands against different things. You're going to see more of that in 2019. Number 46, hotels will take away your alarm clock. So you're going to start seeing hotels evolve and adjust to the things that you normally would have to have in your hotel room in the past. You don't need. People have their phone, right? So now, will you need to have a TV in your room? Or will the TV be able to connect with your phone? So if you were watching something on a plane or listening to a podcast or things like that, now you can pick it right up on your TV when you get to the hotel. So you're going to start seeing hotels innovate the devices that are going to be in your room. Employers making room for neurodiversity. I spoke about that some. People with different cognitive abilities, ADHD, dyslexia, things like that. You're going to see employers find places for them to be able to utilize that talent and those gifts. And so that's going to be something that's going to be interesting in 2019. Drug makers, number 48, will double down on China. We'll see about that. Your next vacation may be the space or undersea. Keep in mind, I think it's Richard Branson who's invested in that company, y'all, in terms of space travel. So that's already kind of started. But in 2019, NASA will start building its lunar space station, and we'll see continued investment in private space flight. All right. So NASA's getting into the space travel business, and it's going to be space and people traveling underseas. So you're going to start seeing people, and of course everything's got a scale, right? So you'll start seeing rich people, I guess, traveling to space and traveling to places in deep waters and the oceans and things like that. So, and the last one, and I want to hone on this really quickly, but we will stop living an Insta life. The social media honeymoon is over. As people question their screen addiction, the impacts are felt in all walks of life, from dinners where guests demand the phones be put away to changing trends in the beauty industry. Quote, in 2019, people are looking to scale back, simplify their routine and their look, says Melissa Butler, founder and CEO of The Lip Bar, after years where trends were set by Instagram influencers and elaborate makeup tutorials on YouTube. Quote, social media has played such a big part in pressuring us to show up in a certain way. People are looking to reconnect with who they are, go back to the basics. All right. So this is what you're going to start seeing. That was number 50, the last one on the list. Social media. So I'm on Spreaker. I'm on Facebook Live. Later on, this episode will be on YouTube, and you'll be able to find it on Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and everywhere else. That's my shameful plug for y'all going out and listening to this particular podcast, the Minding Your Business podcast. But what you're going to start seeing in 2019 is people are going to be burnt out some with social media. And they're going to look for ways to get back to the human connection. All right. And so for those that are leaders within social media platforms and companies, they're going to have their hands full with how do they continue to engage people into social media, because you're going to see, and this will continue in 2020, I imagine, but in 2019, you're going to start seeing people somewhat begin to watch and start limiting their engagement on social media. And so that's going to be critical to how people do business, because so much of advertising dollars now go through Google and Facebook and Instagram and all that. And so I would say this, that we all need to look at how we engage through social media and be cognizant of that. And at the end of the day, living your best life is about who you influence, who you impact, and who's going to remember you once you're gone. So once you're no longer here to post, right? Because once you transition here, you're no longer here to post. Then what happens? No one's going to remember all your posts, what you've done in the past. They're going to remember how you made them feel and what impact that you had. So that's with your family, that's with your friends, with your Facebook friends, whatever. And so 2019, you're going to start seeing people be a little introspective on how they utilize social media. Okay, so keep that in mind for you as a business owner. If you do a lot of your business and you're connecting is solely through social media, you might want to consider at least slowly getting back to more of a face-to-face interaction, which many of you probably already do, and you've already recognized that, but look for that to become a little more popular and some more insight to come on that in 2019. So I went through that really fast, but it is posted on the Minding Your Business podcast page. That's the 50 big ideas for 2019, and you can find it on LinkedIn as well. Listen, I hope that this was helpful. If you're listening to this episode or you're watching on Facebook Live, on Spreaker, I hope this was helpful. I hope the insight is helpful. I hope that you round out 2018 and you get ready for a very interesting 2019. As far as getting ready for 2019, I've got a big early part of the year scheduled. I've got some national guests that are going to be joining me on the podcast, talking about a myriad of subjects from real estate. Matter of fact, next week we're going to have Chris Prefontaine, who's out of the New England area, who is a coach and mentor, someone I've been able to connect with, and he's going to be my guest on next week's podcast, talking about all things real estate. He's going to join me via Facebook Live, so it's going to be something that you don't want to miss if you're interested in real estate in any kind of capacity, no matter what your bank account is, no matter what your credit situation is and whatnot. You need to get involved in real estate to some capacity. At least I recommend it. And so Chris is going to come on and we're going to talk all about that. We're going to share some stories and have a good time. All right. So I'm Champ Ron. This is episode 73, 50 big ideas for 2019, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. Thank you for joining on the Minding Your Business podcast. Don't forget the Binge Podcast Network. Make sure you check that out. Make sure that if you're here on Spreaker, on Facebook Live, that you all connect. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Julius Harris, what's up? Delax, what's going on? Tiffany, how you doing? So thank y'all for joining. And listen, I'm out. Have a great weekend, and we're going to catch you again next week with Chris Prefontaine. I'm out.